What if Bella became the Volturi Queen? Hey, today I am reading What If Bella Became the Volturi Queen. So let's get started. Bella clung to Edward's hand like her life depended on it, which it probably did in their current predicament. She'd just saved Edward from revealing himself to the human locals in the town square under the clock tower. Their reunion was cut short when two vampires from the Volturi Guard showed up and confronted them in a somewhat civil manner that turned hostile thanks to Edward's overprotectiveness. Let's just say they were fortunate that Alice showed up when she did. Everything's going to be all right, Bella. Bella was stirred from her inner musings when she felt Alice softly take hold of her other hand that wasn't clutching desperately to Edward's. She forced a small smile at the vampire she considered her sister. Having Alice there along with them gave Bella mixed feelings. The Pixielica vampire could either be extremely beneficial during their confrontation with the Volturi leaders, or Bella could have just doomed her to the same fate to whatever was to befall on her and Edward. Alice didn't deserve to be punished for her brother's wrongdoing. She was only trying to save both him and their secret. I wouldn't be so optimistic just yet. Jane, the childlike vampire that Edward and Alice both seemed to fear, said coolly from the front of the group. Edward squeezed her hand tightly and Bella looked up at him. His gaze was steeled ahead with his jaw clenched tight in frustration. Whatever Jane was thinking really must have angered him. Hey, she whispered to get his attention. He glanced down at her and his face seemed to relax. I won't let anything happen to you, he replied, and Bella nodded and moved further into his side. He seemed so sure, but Bella was having trouble being as optimistic. Her stomach was doing little flips as they ventured deeper into the ancient Italian castle. There was no way they were going to walk away without any form of punishment. They were all quiet for the remainder of the trip until they reached a pair of 10-foot solid oak doors. Bella slowed in her steps at the sight up them. Her and Edward's fate were just beyond those doors. It was nerve-wracking to think that there was a chance they could never leave that room, that they could be walking straight to their deaths. Edward noticed her resistance to entering the room and slowed down. Just don't leave my side. He'll take care of you. I promise. Whatever happens, know that I won't be able to live without you. She shook her head numbly. Not again, Bella? If they kill you then. Edward stopped fully and turned to face her. The two guards behind them glared at him in warning, but he ignored them and focused on Bella. Don't talk like that. I want you to live, Bella, whatever their verdict may be. Promise me you'll choose to live. Bella felt lightheaded at how fiercely she was shaking her head. No. I can't. Not without you, please. He begged, moving closer and speaking lowly to her. He reached out and grabbed her other hand. Promise me this, Bella. Go back to Forks and forget all of this. You deserve a better life than what I've given you. You have given me a better life. She cut in, clinging to him urgently. You've saved me so many times where I would have died if not for you. You're the reason that I'm alive, Edward. She flicked her eyes back up to his, seeing how he was staring at her with such misery. I refuse to live without you. I love you, Bella. She breathed heavily through her nose and tilted her head to touch his lowered one. I love you. Always. She muttered softly back. Guys, they broke apart by the sound of Alice's soft voice. Bella sighed and turned to her vampire sister. Alice smiled sadly before kissing her softly on the cheek and nodded to Edward, having said whatever it was to her brother in her head. Let's get this over with, Bella said more confidently before she lost her nerve. Behind her, she heard a few amused chuckles from the two guards that had been hostile towards Edward earlier. She flickered her gaze briefly over them and blushed at their hungry, cat-like grins that were aimed at her. Edward also seemed to notice and gently tugged her ahead on him. Shall we? Jane grinned maliciously. Bella had a feeling this childlike vampire would have a hand in carrying out whatever punishment they were going to be shown. Effortlessly the little blonde parted the large doors and strode into the room with purpose. Bella kept close to Edward as they followed Jane into the room with less enthusiasm. The throne room was a circular chamber covered in light-colored marble with a domed ceiling stretched several stories up. It surprised Bella how bright and airy the space was. She didn't know what she was expecting before walking in. Coffins, skeletons, and chains maybe, but definitely not this. If she hadn't known any better, she would have thought this to be a room in a regal English castle. It was breathtakingly beautiful. So distracted by her surroundings, she almost didn't notice when their group came to a stop before a large dais in the back of the room. She felt dread set in when the king in the middle stood from his throne and slowly made his approach. Bella felt like the world around her was moving in slow motion, and yet she was still unable to move quick enough to keep up with it. She wasn't even quite sure how they reached the point they were at. Aro, the raven-haired vampire king, had come to some silent decision with the other kings before all hell was set loose. Alice was struggling to free herself from one guard while Edward was battling it out with a vampire that made Emmett look small in comparison. "Stop! Please!" She screamed and frantically dug her hands through her tangled hair. Despite Edward having the ability to read the other's mind, it wasn't enough to take down the larger vampire. He was losing, and if Bella didn't do anything, then she might witness Edward being executed before her eyes. She took a step forward but halted when a cold hand gripped her upper arm. Aro was suddenly standing next to her with an amused gleam in his crimson eyes. "It's what he deserves, my dear," he said in a false kind tone. "Don't you touch her," Edward growled from across the room, despite being in a headlock. Bella shot him a pitiful expression. There was nothing either of them could do. "You dare make a command from your king?" The blonde vampire, Caius, raged and shot up from his throne. "Jane!" he ordered, and the young girl was across the room in a flash. Bella stared in horror at the sight of her hovering over Edward. "No! Don't! Not again!" She pleaded and resisted against Aro's grasp. Caius ignored her and kept his glare on Edward. "Master?" Jane grinned, appearing delighted to use her horrible gift on him again. Bella felt her heart drop at her predatory gaze. How could someone take so much joy out of torturing others? "Felix," the king said, and the large vampire released Edward and swiftly moved towards the dais at a safe distance. Jane simply beamed. "Pain!" Edward arched so violently on the ground that Bella swore she felt his pain along with him. She cried out for them to stop, and Aro released her as she crumbled to the ground in tears. Edward's jaw was clamped shut in an attempt to hold back his screams. The longer he was under Jane's gaze, the more his limbs went rigid and bent in painful positions. It was when he couldn't hold it in any longer that Bella's heart shattered. His pain-filled scream shook Bella to her core. Her sobbing stopped when a painful lump formed deep in her throat. She coughed and choked on it, gasping for the air that her lungs so desperately needed. After a moment the lump melted, and when it did, Bella wasn't able to hold back the scream that tore through her throat. In that moment, Edward's pain became hers, and it was unbearable. Over both of their screams that were amplified by the marble pillars, Bella heard the splintering sound of wood shattering and stone colliding with stone. She gasped for breath, feeling lightheaded. Jane suddenly stopped and stared wide-eyed at the cause of the commotion behind them. She disappeared and finally ended Edward's torment. Behind her, there were sounds of vampires snarling and fighting, but Bella kept her eyes glued to Edward and the way his chest heaved up and down. Without thinking about it, she weakly began to crawl towards him. "Bella! Wait!" Alice shouted in desperation. She turned around and was startled at the sight of Alice and one of the Volturi guards on their knees on the ground with their heads bowed. What in the world were they doing? "Hey, Alice?" she whined, fearful. Behind them, the scuffle grew louder. Alice's dark eyes flickered toward her. "Don't approach Edward. He won't be safe if you do. Just stay where you are." Bella stared at her in confusion. What was she talking about? Bella? Edward wheezed and she snapped her head back to him. He was still breathing heavily on his back on the hard floor. Slowly he raised his hand and twitched it in her direction. He was reaching out for her. "Edward, no!" Alice hissed. Bella didn't think twice and started moving towards him again, intent on grabbing his hand and holding onto him for dear life. She would shield him with her body if that were what it took. She was 6 feet from reaching him when a dark robe suddenly filled her vision. Bella stopped and stared wide-eyed at the vampire that separated her and Edward. Fear trickled its way down her spine as she steadily raised her eyes up to the predator's face, expecting to find herself on her hands and knees at the feet of one of the Volturi kings. Instead, to her surprise, Bella found herself staring up at a beautiful woman. She had long, dark brown wavy hair that shaped her thin face perfectly. Her eyes were a deep onyx shade, but Bella didn't find them threatening, especially since this vampire was gazing down at her with such tender adoration. Bella was further shocked when the woman gently bent down to her level in a non-threatening manner. "Hello," the vampire said softly with an almost shy smile. Bella couldn't stop gawking at her beauty. Sulpisha, one of the 3 queens of the Volturi. A queen? So this mysterious woman must be a wife to one of the cruel kings. Surprisingly, the thought of that made Bella angry. "May I know your name?" she asked, that sweet smile still on her beautiful pale face. Bella shuffled in her spot, suddenly uncomfortable with her appearance because she was sure she looked like a wreck. "Bella," she responded softly, earning a wide grin from Sulpisha. "Bella?" Sulpisha whispered fondly. Bella blushed and looked away. Her heart was racing in her chest. "Beautiful, simply beautiful. I've waited a long time for you, Bella. You're someone very important to me. Do you know why?" The American teen looked at her baffled. "I am important to you?" Bella asked distressingly, not sure if it was a good thing or not. "Why?" "Because you're my other half, dear," Sulpisha said and laughed softly. Bella swore she heard little bells ringing. "We were made for each other. You feel it, don't you? I can tell by the way you're looking at me. Oh, my sweet little mate." She held her breath when Sulpisha suddenly leaned forward and pressed her cold, soft lips to her. Every nerve in Bella's body tingled and burned like she was just struck by lightning, except there wasn't any pain. All her fear, distress, and confusion melted away the longer Sulpisha kept their lips connected. Too soon the vampire queen slowly pulled back and embarrassingly Bella found herself leaning forward to catch them again. She blushed heavily when Sulpisha chuckled. "Don't worry, little one, I will drown you in affection until your heart no longer beats." She cooed and glided a cold finger across Bella's cheek before leaning in close and whispering in her ear, and even long after it stops, Bella could hear how heavy she was breathing in the quiet room. They were slow, self-calming breaths that helped bring her back to the present. Her mind was still racing after everything that's happened in the past 5 minutes that's been completely out of her and Edward's control, and she was trying hard now to understand their predicament and how she needed to act in order to not make things any worse for them. There was movement somewhere in the room and Bella recalled that Edward was incapacitated on the ground, still reeling from the effects of Yane's torture. He was hurt because he'd been trying to defend her. He took her punishment. She blinked several times and tried to clear her sore throat. Edward's done his part, now it was time to do hers. "Okay," Bella finally said, responding to what the vampire queen had whispered so tenderly in her ear. "Kill me in place of Edward. Take me as your prisoner or I'll do anything. Please." "He doesn't deserve." She suddenly stopped when a rush of emotions for her boyfriend overcame her. Bella shook her head and bit her lower lip, unable to control the tears that began to pool in her eyes. Edward didn't deserve to die for her. He and his family already sacrificed so much just to protect her. If she could have Edward spared by sacrificing herself, then maybe that'd be a good way of paying it all back. There was a cold, soft touch under her chin just as Bella let the first tear slip from her eye. She lifted her gaze and let the vampire queen look upon her red, swollen cheeks and puffy eyes. The queen's round eyes were black and imploring. Bella found herself distracted by the way they glistened until something small and pearl-shaped slipped from the inner corner of her left eye. She attentively watched it slid down the queen's porcelain cheek and pool at her sharp chin before it dripped off. Bella's eyebrows knitted together in confusion. That couldn't have been a tear, could it? Edward said vampires couldn't cry. Venom would swell in their eyes but would never escape forming real tears. It was supposed to be impossible. "You poor girl." The queen, Sulpisha, whispered, and delicately glided her hand up to cup Bella's left cheek. "You've been in this position before, haven't you?" Bella couldn't speak. Her throat felt warm and uncomfortably tight. Queen Sulpisha tilted her head and breathed slowly through her nose. "Willing to give your own life in the place of someone you love," she whispered and softly caressed her skin with her cold thumb. "You've done it before, and are willing again now. My tender girl, my heart aches at what dark paths you've been forced to walk that have led you here." The vampire queen reached out with her other hand to gently grasp Bella's own and wove their fingers together. After a moment Bella squeezed the queen's hand, clutching it so tightly that it would have been painful to anyone else who wasn't a vampire. She felt like her heart was too large in her chest and could rupture at any moment. Her emotions broke the last barrier that Shed thought collapsed when Edward was being tortured. It was all too much. Her body felt hot and she knew she was shaking. Warm tears were rushing down her face. She couldn't stop them even if she wanted to. Her brain was only focused on letting go the pain and sorrow that's been building up in her for years. In her head, she kept chanting, "She's right. She's right. Oh God, she's right." Because why had fate chosen this life for her? It wasn't so much how she'd come to discover and learn about the supernatural world, but the price she'd been forced to pay and was still paying for. She tortured Edward with her scent of her blood. She risked the lives of the Cullens' entire family. She hurt Charlie and left him just to keep him safe from James. She risked her mom's safety. She made Jasper lose control after decades of self-discipline and restraint. She was the reason that the Cullens went their separate ways and left Forks. She hurt Jacob by not being able to return his feelings and then left him. She almost caused Edward to kill himself, and now Alice's life was at risk too. A sob escaped her lips. "Why?" She croaked and leaned into the vampire's hand that was cupping her cheek. Why had fate chosen her for all of this? Why her and not someone stronger and smarter? If she had known back then what would have happened after first meeting Edward, would she have chosen differently? Had warned her about the risks of forming a relationship with him, but she had agreed anyway despite the fear that settled in her heart ever since. "I didn't mean to," she continued to weakly cry. "It's all my fault. It's all my fault." Bella felt the vampire queen release her cheek and hand before a pair of long, slender arms wrapped around her. She cries shook her body as she leaned fully into the other woman's embrace and didn't fear being bitten or crushed. Despite being in a room with many ancient vampires, Bella felt shielded and secure with this immortal. "The Cullen children are not to be harmed," Sulpisha softly said to everyone in the throne room, but Bella couldn't hear anything over her own whimpering and sobs. "They mean too much to my mate. Whether they are given rooms here or sent on their way varies on your preferences, my brothers. My obligation now is to my mate and I must see to her." There was a shift in the arms around her as Bella felt herself being lifted and held bridal style. She kept her eyes shut and hid her face into Queen Sulpisha's rounded chest. Her long, sweet-smelling hair tickled Bella's red nose. The room was quiet for a few seconds before Marcus chose to speak first. "You may leave to take care of your distraught mate, sister. As for the Cullen children, I think it is best they remain with us until we all begin to see some clarity for everything that we've witnessed today. As requested, they shall not be harmed. The human child needs not another reason to shed more tears. I only wish we'd known of her importance before her and her companions were brought to us. She is braver than most." Sulpisha remained silent and nodded to her brother and fellow ruler in thanks. She then glanced around the room to Aro and Caius and watched them both nod in agreement to Marcus' words. She was about to leave until the voice of the young Cullen girl spoke up. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Alice said softly, her head still bowed. "I know that Bella will be safe and have the chance to truly be happy with you, but she means a lot to us all." And the petite vampire paused, unsure how to properly phrase what she wanted to ask of someone who was royal. Sulpisha understood, but the need to take care of her mate was priority. "I'll summon you so we may speak more freely at a later time," she replied faintly after a quick glance down to the grieving human in her arms. Alice stared sadly at Bella, then lowered her head. "I appreciate it, Your Majesty." "Thank you." Sulpisha didn't wait for anyone else to speak up and quickly fled from the room with her mate securely in her arms. The castle was quiet as she glided through the halls towards her private chambers. The royal guards were wise to remove themselves from her sight. Aro had seen many strange incidents take place in the throne room, but never had he expected to witness the first meeting of a destined pair. And for it to happen to one of the Volturi queens nonetheless. Over 3,000 years past his birthing and the universe was still providing him with surprises. And to think he and his brothers at first ordered for the human child to be killed. Oh, Sulpisha would have beheaded them all. As beautiful and courteous their charming sister was known to be, she was also the most passionate and creative when she expressed her rage. Caius was a close second. It was rare for Sister Sulpisha to let him into her mind, but Aro would insist until the dawn of a century if it came to that. He wanted to learn how she first discovered her mate was in the castle, how she perceived the situation in the throne room when she barged through the doors and everything that happened afterward through her eyes. He craved details. Her inner musings, oh, and most curiously, how she felt about her dear little human already claiming to be in love with another vampire. The thought made Aro grin widely. The next few days were certainly to be looked forward to. Will you quit smirking to yourself like that? There is nothing amusing in the slightest about this situation. Our throne room has been destroyed and a human who still has yet to pay for her crimes is walking free. Aro closed his eyes to prevent himself from rolling them in front of Caius. Sometimes his brother was too hot-headed and blinded by his resentment towards humans to recognize a situation for what it truly was. Luckily, Brother Marcus responded before Aro had the chance to put together a sentence that wouldn't offend Caius. One must always be careful when addressing the eldest of the three. The girl has nothing to pay for, Caius. True, she knows our secret, but soon she is to become a part of that secret. And I think she is just the opposite of walking free as you put it. Sister Sulpisha won't be letting her out of her sight. She has found her mate and will be watchful of her until her change. Marcus said confidently, smiling at the frustrated frown Caius was giving him. In other words, Aro spoke up. Sulpisha will scalp you if you try approaching her human mate and try to make her pay for her crimes. That is how you put it, yes? Am I right, Marcus? Marcus grinned and chuckled softly. Yes, you heard our brother correctly. I've had enough of your mockery, Aro. Caius snarled and whirled around towards his two brothers. He balled up his hands and took 2 wide strides in their direction. Since this situation is so laughable in your eyes, then you order to have this room cleaned and address the prisoners. I am officially removing myself from this case entirely and will direct my focus elsewhere. The blonde king spun back around, his long dark red robe fluttering dramatically as he marched back to his throne to retrieve something. My only request is that you two won't be lenient with the prisoners. They have broken several laws and the Volturi does not give second chances. And then the eldest of the three flitted from across the room and out the broken door. Marcus was quiet for a few seconds before, you upset him on purpose, he observed, glancing at Aro from the corner of his eye. You did not want his part in this case. Aro sighed loudly and shrugged his shoulders. His unsympathetic beliefs only would have got in my way. Plus, you did play along and helped with his departure, only because it is what's best for Sulpisha. I don't desire to drag out this situation when there is no point in doing so. The girl will be turned and remain with us while the Cullen children will be sent back to their coven. You should inform Carlyle of today's events. He will become anxious if he does not hear from his children soon. Marcus then turned to glance at the small Cullen girl. She still obediently had her head bowed. Aro was watching the girl too with a concentrated look on his handsome face. I wonder, he muttered, but didn't voice what he was thinking, so Marcus didn't bother asking. Master Aro? Both kings turned to Alec, who was still standing across the room with a paralyzed Edward at his feet. Aro had commanded for the boy to immediately use his sensory-depriving power on young Edward so the boy wouldn't do anything foolish while Sulpisha was having her moment with her newly found mate. Do you wish for me to return his senses? He asked, the black smoke still falling from the palm of his hands in elegant waves. Aro smiled kindly at him. The eldest Cullen child most likely would have been dead if not for him. Sulpisha would have torn him apart if he tried to get in between her and Bella. Not quite yet, my boy. First, we must have him moved and secured in case he acts up. Felix? The large vampire flitted to the center of the room before his king. Move young Edward to one of the rooms on the west side of the castle. It's best if he is further away from the human. What do you think, Marcus? He won't be tolerant if Hester be separated from his sister. I say they are given rooms next to one another. I imagine he will have many questions once his senses return. Ah, yes, he did miss the most exciting part of this evening. Aro frowned amusedly. Truthfully, he couldn't wait to look into the boy's head once he learned that his human lover was destined for another. He then turned to Alice, who was still on her knees with Dimitri standing beside her. Aro could practically taste the fear, sorrow, and betrayal radiating off her. Her conversation with her brother would certainly be an interesting one. Dear Alice, he said joyfully and took several steps towards her. She raised her head, her eyes dark and concerned when kneeled to her level. Believe it or not, we all owe you our thanks. You brought us Miss Isabella and have helped one of our own find their true mate. Queen Sulpisha will be most thankful, and I know she will make sure you are rewarded. Alice looked bewildered. But I didn't foresee any of this. I had no idea. Hush, child. Aro cooed and held up a slender finger. Alice immediately obeyed. Whether you saw this to come or not, you still played an imperative role in the end. You helped your friend find the vampire who was truly destined to be with. Edward will never forgive me. She whispered miserably. No need to be so negative, dear Alice. From Edward's thoughts, I saw just how close of a bond you two share. In time he will forgive and understand. Aro stood up and laughed softly. Thankfully, time is something our kind has much of. Tell him what happened here today and try to make him see reason. If he tries anything rash, then I will him punished accordingly. He narrowed his eyes to make his point, and Alice nodded nervously. I'll watch over him during our stay. You won't have to worry. She responded softly, sounding more tired and sad than before. I don't doubt that, but just in case he'll have several guards stationed near your quarters. Young Edward must remember Hare's in the Volturi's castle after all. We don't have patience for discourteous guests, I understand. Thank you for housing us, King Aro. Aro smiled and clapped his hands together. Such wonderful manners. Now. He spun on his heel and grinned wider at the image of Edward limp in Felix's arms. It truly was an amusing sight. Felix was doing well to hide his discomfort. Dimitri, Felix, please take our young guests to their assigned quarters and stand guard once you've shown them around. Alec, go with them to ensure that Edward won't cause any trouble. Release him from your gift once everyone is situated. The three high guards bowed before dashing from the room with their guests in tow. To Caius, the two Cullens may be prisoners, but Aro saw them more as long-term guests. He was sure Carlyle will be sympathetic when he calls and tells him about his children. Maybe he'll even invite his old friend over. Apparently, they had much to catch up on. I'll take my leave then, Marcus said, drawing Aro from his thoughts. Aro frowned. Not going to help reassemble the throne room, brother? The corner of Marcus' lip twitched up. I don't believe for a second that you would take part in the labor of doing so. Plus, I recall Caius giving that burden to you before you made him storm out. I'm free for the rest of the evening, and I plan to spend my time with my dear Didime. Aro watched Marcus swiftly dash from the room before he had the chance to respond. The raven-haired king sighed and turned to the only other remaining occupant in the room, Jane. When they made eye contact, the small blonde smiled at the attention. Aro returned the grin half-heartedly. Is there something you need of me, master? She asked. Yes, he said, and kicked a small piece of broken marble with the tip of his show. Sulpisha made quite a mess when she barged into the room and tried challenging them all. Even Felix was overwhelmed when she charged him. Clean this up for me, will you? Unlike his brothers, Aro escaped out the shattered double doors. The end.